by the people of Chile. Allende did not take power through a revolution. Very well, that a revolution means a new situation. Revolution means that the abuses and excesses of the violent, reactionary, and disruptive minority has to be crushed so that the majority interest can prevail. When the Americans had their revolution in 1776, it took them 13 years to call their election. They talk about detainees, but when the American Revolution came in 1776, 600,000 people were detained. 100,000 Americans in the first week of the American Revolution, 100,000 fled to Canada. Thousands were locked up without charge or trial. Hundreds were shot. And the counter-revolutionaries after the American Revolution, they had no right to vote. They had no right to teach. They had no right to preach. They had no right to a job. Their land was confiscated without payment. So when the falsifiers of history try to pretend that the American Revolution was a Boston Tea Party, was a very bloody Tea Party. That's something that very often happens in all revolutions, the spontaneous upheaval of the masses. Did not really happen.
Hear me, right? Yes. Okay, let me just first apologize first for my voice, because I'm struggling with the cold a little bit. I did survive Carnival, but the cold is not letting me go free. So I have a bit of a sore throat, a bit of a cough, so I just need to apologize to the audience first for that. And of course, we were supposed to start at 2, but we were just finalizing the all these technical things, especially when dealing with Skype. Some days it worked, and some days something stick, or something take a little while. It's not hearing, so we have to just make sure we finalize those things before we get going. So let me ask everyone to stand and let me invite Frank Richards. Let me just have a word of prayer. This afternoon is a very special afternoon, and I really want to thank everyone who joined us on a Saturday evening. Saturday afternoons are never easy for anyone. So I think it's really for us to express our deep appreciation and gratitude that persons would have taken time of their Saturday afternoon to join us in recognizing a very important event. And we decided that the theme will be Never Forget, because it's an event in our Caribbean history, in the history of developing people across the world actually, not just in the Caribbean, that moment be recognized, and that we spend a little time this afternoon reflecting on the impact, what it meant, and as well its relevance even in today's geopolitical world. And we all know it's very relevant now when one considers what is happening to neighboring Venezuela. It's almost reminiscent of that period of the 70s into the 80s, where there was interventions all across Latin America, as well as other parts of Africa and Asia. So we are seeing that type of politics playing itself out once again by our powerful neighbor to the north, right in our lifetime. For those of us who are not so young, will probably remember other lifetimes, in particular the Grenadian Revolution, and then of course the subsequent invasion. I myself, in 1979, I was 5 years old. I know I probably look like I wasn't born yet. But that's because I took a haircut this morning, right? But I was 5 years old, and so I did not have a recollection of the actual beginning of the revolution. But what I do have a recollection of, because 4 years later, I would have been 9, and the images that we saw coming across on television. And it would have been only much later on in my young adult life, like still continued young adult life. I really appreciate what was happening in Grenada. And we think that it's, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary, 13th of March 1979, 13th of March after it was just, I think it was Wednesday. 40 years later, 40 years on, we as progressive people, as a progressive movement, cannot, must not only must we not forget, we must ensure that others do not as well. And it is for this reason the Joint Trade Union Movement, as well as the Movement for Social Justice, collaborated and putting together a small panel for us to recognize the 40th anniversary of the Grenadian Revolution, such a powerful and important revolution, and for us to share and sort of reminisce a little bit, but analyze what took place and place it even in today's context. I think that that is also important. The structure of the program is simple. We will have 3 powerful panelists, and I understand that there will be 1 or 2 interventions coming from the floor, and then we actually open it up for persons to ask questions, for persons to maybe share their experiences. Sometimes, right in the audience here, we will have persons who may have been impacted by what has happened, by what happened between 79 and 83. So it is an opportunity to share and for us to build within our collective consciousness the aspirations and dreams of that very historic moment. I'd like to recognize the ambassador of Cuba to Trinidad and Tobago, new ambassador. That is Her Excellency Tania Diego Olite, who's with us here this afternoon. And it's very interesting, of course, that we have the presence of the Cuban ambassador, because we all know Cuba and Grenada, and Maurice Bishop in particular, were very, very, very close. And when we consider today's geopolitical scenario and the statements being made by President to the North concerning Cuba, because he's made several comments about Cuba to isolate Cuba even further, that I think it is it's excellent that we have the presence of the Cuban ambassador here with us this afternoon, and will be willing to share a few things as well. We also have but I saw her earlier, but we had an icon, national icon, poet, Pearl and Springer. I understand she just stepped back out to come back, so she will be joining us momentarily. And we do have members of the MSJ executive. We have Gregory Fernandez, the chairman. We have Melissa Aguilera, and we have Franca James, who are with us. I saw the youth representative somewhere about Angelo. I'd also like to recognize from the trade union movement, we have the president of the All Trinidad General Workers Union, Novan Baraj. We have president of the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, Edie Stewart. We have the Secretary General of the Postal Workers Union, Comrade David Forbes, and we have 2 executive officers of the OWTU, Comrade Ram Singh, Chandrasekhar Ram Singh, and of course, Comrade Ricky Benny, as well as some other officers. So, I hope I didn't forget anyone. And of course, oh, yes, I did forget someone. We have with us as well, Comrade Roberta Clark, who's here with us. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Of course, a long fighter for women's rights, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the Caribbean, and has made significant contributions. So we're happy that you're here with us, because as we analyze the revolution, the Grenadian Revolution, you'll see that a lot of emphasis was placed on women's participation and so on. So it'll be interesting for us to have that discourse. In my intro here, I would like to also say that I think that it's easy for us now to sometimes take for granted the truly historic moment, not just for Grenada, but for the Caribbean, in terms of what happened. Grenada was literally deciding its own path and its own destiny by breaking down some of the old vestiges of colonialism, and was shifting from representative democracy to participatory democracy. Pre-revolutionary Grenada suffered from unemployment levels of upward of 50%. Through the development of cooperatives, the expansion of the industrial base, the diversification of agriculture, the expansion of the tourist industry, and the creation of massive public works programs, unemployment dropped to some 14%. And the percentage of food imports dropped from 40% to 28%, at a time when market prices for agricultural products were collapsing. Paulo Freire, of course, global and international intellectual in the field of education, revolutionary education, if you will, designed and led the implementation of a literacy program which saw the wiping out of the literacy rate increased from 85% to 98%. By 1983, 37% of the national budget was being spent on education and health. That was the priority. School fees were abolished and schools were repaired. We have the revolution also strongly focused on women's empowerment and participation. The changes in the society, Grenadian society, were reflected by a massively invigorated national culture, expressed through calypso, poetry, dance, drama. It was almost like a renaissance. Organs of power, and this was critical, sprung up everywhere. Nearly everyone was involved in some level of organization and decision making in terms of zonal councils, the workers' parish councils, farmers' councils, the youth movement, and even the women's movement, all of which had regular meetings once a month. This is just a snippet of what could be considered the achievements of the revolution in such a short space of time. So I do not want to spend much time opening. We have a panel of 3 very powerful speakers. One such person, his name is Don Rojas, and I brought with me an old book that I found in my library, published around that time in the 1980s by Casa de las Americas in Cuba, actually. It was edited by Don Rojas himself, who was the press secretary to Maurice Bishop during the time of the revolution. We also have another icon. I call these persons national icons, who was part of building that revolutionary Grenada. And we will hear from her in terms of the education, the attempt at revolutionary education in Grenada, that is none other than from Merle Hodge. And then we will hear from David Abdullah, political leader of the Movement for Social Justice, who was part of the trade union movement during those exciting times, one may argue. Exciting, yes, but we also have to recognize the tragedy. And I think during this discussion over the next few hours, we will look at the achievements, but we will also have to be very brutally honest with ourselves and also analyze the tragedy. Before I do that, I just want to read very quickly an excerpt from this book that I found. And it is the first address to the nation on Radio Free Grenada on March 13, 1979, 40 years ago, at 10:50 a.m. And this is Maurice Bishop's first address to the nation. I will just read excerpts, and I'm going to read the whole speech. Brothers and sisters, well, I don't have Maurice Bishop's voice either. But one can just imagine, being in Grenada at the time, turning on your radio at 10:50 a.m. to hear these words. Brothers and sisters, this is Maurice Bishop speaking. At 4:15 a.m. this morning, the People's Revolutionary Army seized control of the army barracks at Trooper. The barracks were burned to the ground. After half an hour's struggle, the forces of Gary's army were completely defeated and surrendered. Every single soldier surrendered, and not a single member of the revolutionary forces was injured. I am now calling upon the working people, the youths, workers, farmers, fishermen, middle-class people, and women to join our armed revolutionary forces at central positions in your communities and to give them any assistance which they call for. People of Grenada, this revolution is for work, for food, for decent housing and health services, and for a bright future for our children and great-grandchildren. The benefit of the revolution will be given to everyone, regardless of political opinion or which political party they support. I am appealing to all the people, gather at all central places, all over the country, and prepare to welcome and assist the People's Armed Forces when they come into your area. The revolution is expected to consolidate the position of power within the next few hours. Long live the people of Grenada. Long live freedom and democracy. Let us together build a just Grenada. Those were the words of Maurice Bishop on the 13th of March, 1979 at 10:30 a.m. on Radio Free Grenada. So I will now invite our first panelist. This is from the United States. He will open the panel. As I said, he was the press secretary to Maurice Bishop during that revolutionary period. So, good afternoon, Mr. Rojas. Can you hear me? All right, hold on. Solve the problem, and we have been able to overcome the U.S. intervention. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks to the high-tech knowledge of this 19-year-old nephew of mine, Hollis, he was able to rectify the problem. I thought that David was going to open up, and then I would add my comments on how you want to do it, David. You want me to just go straight into a presentation, and then we can have a discussion later on?
Yes, if you can. Hi Don, good afternoon, yes. If you could start off with some of, the achievements, accomplishments, some of your own analysis and so on, and then Merle will follow you, and I will tag last, because of course both you and Merle were living and working in Grenada in the revolution, and I was looking on from outside. So it's best
well, more than looking on.
Best you and Merle go first, and of course you were both there on October 19th, which was critical. You were not there on March 13th because both, I should say that both yourself and Merle responded to the call of the revolution for Caribbean people to come into Grenada to work as part of the revolutionary process and contribute to the revolutionary process. So I think it'd be good for you and Merle to go first, and then I will go afterwards, if that's okay with you. Yeah?
That's fine.
And if you wish to leave the discussion before it ends, just let us know and we could release you. Yeah?
Okay.
So we're
trying to hang it with you for the whole period.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, good afternoon, sisters and brothers. Warm revolutionary greetings to all those who are participating in this afternoon's event in Trinidad. I unfortunately can't join you, but through the wonders of technology, we're able to connect nonetheless. A special greeting to my old friends, David Abdullah and Merle Hart, both inestimable comrades who I have tremendous respect and love for, and who we worked together on many occasions during the period of the Grenada Revolution. I want to start off, however, let me back up. I'm not talking about, as David correctly pointed out, on the 13th of March 1979, when the revolution came to power, led by Maurice Bishop and the New Jewel movement. I was working in New York at the time. I was a newspaper editor, and I also was a radio show host. But I had a previous history with Maurice Bishop, going back to the days when we were teenagers. We went to the same Presentation Brothers College in Grenada. We were on the tennis teams together. Our parents knew each other well. My father and his father were good friends. So we had a relationship going quite a ways back to the days when I grew up in Grenada. But I landed in Grenada in 1979 at the invitation of Maurice to come back and help build a media infrastructure for the revolution. And I landed in Grenada. It was in October of 1979, which was, I was 30 years old. I was a young man at the time. Well, here we are, 40 years later, we are still talking about the Grenada Revolution and what it meant to the Caribbean region, because it was truly a seminal historical event, and I applaud David Abdullah and the party for lifting up the memory of the Grenada Revolution when you could be doing a million other things on a Saturday afternoon. But I applaud you for that, because keeping the memory of the Grenada Revolution alive is very important for current generations of young Caribbean people who know very little about this seminal chapter in the history of our region. Grenada what happened in Grenada 40 years ago, the triumph of the revolution, and its very regrettable and very unfortunate demise 4 years later, in October of 1983, when Maurice and a number of other comrades, some of them leaders of the government, others leaders of the New Jewel movement, were brutally assassinated in Grenada after the masses had released Bishop from jail. I don't have the time nor the energy to relitigate the deeply and unfortunate political differences that arose within the ruling New Jewel movement that led to the tragedies of Bishop's death and the death of others, and followed by the national curfew that shut down the entire country, followed by US invasion, etc., and the ultimate demise of the Grenada Revolution. I'm not going to go into all of those details. We don't have time for that on this afternoon's discussion. However, I would say that with regard to what happened on October 1983, when the revolution died, as a result of serious crimes that were committed. There are those who are using this opportunity to try to revisit or revise. There's a revisionist history going on right now in various parts of the world that are trying to revise some of the basic facts that took place in Grenada during those horrible days. But all I can say is that for those people who are trying to apologize or explain it away, the death of Bishop and the others who died with him that day, all the other martyrs of the Grenada Revolution who died that day, or who were wounded, and there are many, and that history has not been fully written. By the way, there is no existing memorial, any physical memorial outside of the airport, or Bishop National Airport, that bears the memory of Bishop and the revolution. There is no formal educational initiative underway in Grenada at this time, or anywhere in the Caribbean for that matter, that teaches the current generation what it is that happened in Grenada 40 years ago. This very important chapter in the history of the Caribbean. So I would say that to those who say, oh yes, we made mistakes and we made errors in Bishop's death and so on, I maintain that these were not errors. I maintain that they were premeditated acts of terror against the Grenadian people. And I maintain that they were crimes against humanity. That is how those responsible internally for the collapse of the Grenada Revolution have to come to terms with history. History will prove that I am correct. I say that with all confidence. For me and my family personally, this was a life-changing experience, living and working in Grenada for 4 years. It was a life-changing, transformative experience for me and my family. When we left New York, we left New York back in 1979, with the view that we would settle down in Grenada and raise our family in Grenada, and that didn't work out. However, the experience for me and my family was very exciting. Participating on a day-to-day level in the Grenada revolutionary process was extremely stimulating, intellectually, spiritually, and otherwise. And I wish I had the words to communicate, particularly to the younger people, how motivated we were. Not just me and my family, but so many people of our generation who came to Grenada during the 40 years, during the 4 years of revolution, to work, to contribute, to participate in a process of building a truly independent country, right? By virtue of a grassroots effort to involve masses of Grenadians in the process of building their own society, building a new democracy, a popular, participatory democracy did not exist before the revolution came to power. To involve the masses of the Grenadian people in every aspect of their economic, social, political development. So it was truly a popular revolution in the sense that it was driven by the people, by the energy, the creativity of the Canadian people, and that energy and creativity was also contributed to by many Caribbean people who traveled from all over the region, including the French-speaking Caribbean, to either visit Grenada, see what was going on there, or even spend time working contribution. So, you know, if you're looking for something to motivate you at this particular time, getting involved in a social change experiment, like what the revolution was, would certainly address those anxieties. But the revolution achieved a tremendous amount in a very concrete way in terms of governance, in terms of economic management and development. You had a period of time when for 3 consecutive years, gross domestic product of the Grenadian economy grew by almost 5%. I have to give credit to the man who I have been very critical of over the years, Bernard Ford, Deputy Prime Minister, who I think bears the ultimate moral responsibility for the crisis of October 1983. He is a brilliant economist and was a political economist, and it is under his guidance that the Grenadian economy grew very impressively during those 4 short years. In the area of educational development, where Sister Conrad World will speak to that, because she was intimately involved in that process, building institutions of popular education throughout the country, helping to reduce the level of illiteracy, bringing educational programs into the rural parts of the country, all of which she was involved in when she worked with the Minister of Education, Comrade Jackie, who was also one of those martyrs that was killed, that was executed at Fort Rupert. We have to lift up and remember the contribution that she made when she was alive to the revolution. Yes, and in the area of medicine, you know, with the help of Cuban doctors, Cuban internationalist doctors, we were able to bring substantial improvements to public health and public health delivery systems throughout the country. In the area of sports, Grenada made tremendous progress during the revolution on all those levels. In the area of culture, cultural expression, in the form of Kaiso, revolutionary Kaiso, revolutionary songs that percolated throughout the Caribbean region. The young, artistic creativity of the Grenadian people produce those kinds of results. So Grenada was an exciting place to live and to work and to feel that you were truly involved in something historic, something that would change the Caribbean civilization for a long time. It would have a huge impact, positive impact. And it did. There were literally hundreds of Caribbean people who came to Grenada, work to volunteer, etc., and to make contributions to what they saw as a revolutionary process that was beyond the tiny island of Grenada, that it had a significance that transcended the region and indeed the world. Yeah, so there were, I want to also lift up the parish council and the zonal and parish council process that was established. The idea was that to get the mass organizations, women's groups, youth groups, groups of professionals, the workers, get them all involved in city councils, get the representatives involved in determining with the PRG what were the best policies for developing their communities, their villages, etc. Involving representatives of the mass organizations in planning the economy, unheard of. Planning economic development was a truly revolutionary act and a truly democratic act. It was inspiring, and they responded. The Grenadian masses responded very, very well to this particular initiative. Even planning the national budget, we were involved in making contributions to planning a government-driven, but people endorsed and people supported, and people involved economic planning and budgeting process. So that was extremely significant, and I wanted to make sure to lift that up in this short presentation. So, I mean, I can go on, David, for a long time. We had, Grenada did achieve, not all by itself. We also enjoyed the solidarity of many countries around the world, principally revolutionary Cuba. I have to admit that there is no other country in the Caribbean that is as stellar in its concrete solidarity, its revolutionary solidarity, as has been Cuba and continues to be. So it is I think it is, for all of us, we have to, hold on a second. To remember that and to appreciate what our Cuban comrades, sisters and brothers in Cuba have done for us over in terms of their solidarity in Grenada, but also ongoing solidarity throughout the region. And that's a reflection of who they really are, how principled, revolutionary people they are. And that's, again, another reason why Maurice Bishop paid such a stake in developing a close relationship with Fidel Castro and Cuban leadership from the very early days in 1979. But the very first revolution, the first active diplomatic outreach of the revolution was with Cuba. And that proved to be tremendously to achieving the same economic development that I just mentioned, 5%. Because we got aid from Cuba in a range of industries, agribusiness, fisheries, and of course, principally the building of the international airport, the Maurice Bishop International Airport. But Cuba sent to Grenada during those 4 years hundreds of workers, hundreds. Just this one country in the Caribbean, they sent engineers, they sent scientists, doctors, nurses, working in the hospitals, going into all the villages, making house calls to the poorest people in villages all over the country. All right, so these are Cuban internationalists and Cuban solidarity workers helped to catapult Grenada during those 4 years. So we have to lift up, remind the region that, that Cuba is a Caribbean country, and they take their regional identification very seriously. So anyway, with the Cuban help, a lot was achieved economically, socially, politically during the times of the revolution. And I think the time has come now, you know, for 40 years, for there to be a serious effort made to begin at the level of the existing Grenada government, to begin some kinds of programs in the schools, or even some public education programs that help to teach the current Grenadian generation something about that 4-year period of their modern history that was so seminal, so significant to them and to the entire region. This idea of turning a blind eye or paying this lip service to Maurice by the current government of Grenada is not going to cut it. You know, pressure has to be brought to bear from them, something more. I know Maurice's daughter, Nadia, who is herself a trained lawyer and attorney based in the US, has been waging a violent struggle for years, trying to get the Grenada government to hand over Maurice Bishop's remains to the Bishop family. They've asked the Americans to do that, because the Americans, the Grenadians and the Americans have their ashes. So that she and the family could give him a decent burial somewhere in Grenada. That is yet to happen. It's a shame after 50 years. But yeah, it does bring back a lot of nostalgic memories for me and for my family. We consider Grenada 40 years later. I think historians will still have to. There's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of analytical work to do in terms of ideological arguments that arose within the party that led to the demise of the revolution. Therein contain many, many lessons for us today, those of us who are still involved in social change work and in political reform. So, as I'm sure many of you listening to this broadcast today are involved in that kind of work. Lots of important lessons to be learned from what happened in Grenada. So David, with your indulgence, I will pause for a minute.
Yes, Don. Before I give it back to Ozzy, who's the moderator, I think Don would be, it's okay if I say this, that we deeply appreciate Don being with us by Skype this afternoon, because he's actually having a tremendous battle of his own personally, fighting cancer right now. And there's a GoFundMe, which I'll talk about afterwards. I will talk about it when Don is online. So Don, you know, we really appreciate your making the physical and emotional effort to speak about the Grenadian Revolution.
Well, I had to do it.
So let's hear another round of applause. I should just indicate before I hand over to Ozzy, since I'm the mic, that the Cuban ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago is here, so she heard you. It's the first female ambassador from Cuba to Trinidad and Tobago, and she only a week ago was able to present her credentials, so she's officially now the ambassador, Her Excellency Tanya Diego Olite. So she heard of all your comments, and I'm sure she appreciated them as well.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you, Comrade Sister Ambassador, and please accept my unqualified solidarity with your government and with your revolution.
Yeah.
And I little later on, I'll tell you that I did spend 3 years, I've got 40 years, I spent 3 years living in Havana, Cuba. This was in the 1980s, some of the most pleasant times that my family and I have enjoyed. So if we have time, we could talk a little bit.
We could talk about that. I remember visiting you at your apartment there. All right, but N2 Springer joined us a while ago. You remember, Don, in August of 1983, we were having a planning meeting for the second Intellectuals for the Sovereignty of the Caribbean, which was chaired by Comrade George Lamy. And we were meeting down at the hotel, and N2 was there with Earl Lovelace and yourself and so on in that planning meeting. So N2 has joined us while he was speaking.
Oh, nice. Hey, comrade. Welcome.
Okay, so what we're going to do, Don, we'll keep you on the computer. We'll probably turn it around a little bit so you can actually see the audience, or actually to see whoever is speaking. We'll shift the laptop accordingly so that you really feel you're part of the session, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, great.
Thank you.
One of the things that struck me, Don, is when you said that you were 30 years old, when you went to join in building a new Grenada, a new Caribbean civilization. And we do have some young people in our audience here. So I think it was very inspirational to hear how you at that age of 30, decided to make a solid contribution to transforming not just Grenada, but really transforming the Caribbean civilization. So I think that says a lot for those of us. But I'm a little past 30, just a little past 30. But there are those in the audience here who would hear that message. And just to let you know, we are also taping, so this entire session would be on YouTube. Because it's important, of course, to use the technology to spread the information. So we will also have it on YouTube, which we'll send to you, and you can also spread it around, and we'll send it to many of the different youth councils and so on throughout the Caribbean. We're really going to use this as a catalyst to maybe spark something powerful going forward.
We're happy to help.
Okay, now we have with us, as I said, a national icon, Comrade Merle Hodge. I like to call her Comrade. And the feminists, they have buffed me many times when I used to say Sister Comrade. It's like, what is Sister Comrade? What is that? So I've learned my lesson. So Comrade Merle, who would have joined others like Don, as I said, not just to transform Grenada, but really transform the Caribbean civilization. So we are going to hear from her, her own thoughts and feelings and analysis of that historic moment in Caribbean, I would even say in world history, that of the Grenadian Revolution. Please join me in welcoming Comrade Merle Hodge.
I'm Cuban ambassador, right? Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago, and I just want to let people know that, well, just to let people know the kind of cooperation. I was in education, I was in a teacher education program and producing materials. And I had the job of getting together with other people, a new set of readers that we named the marriage show readers. Step by step, we got teachers to help us know what the interests of the children were. The teachers helped to give ideas for stories in the readers and so. And these readers, as far as we got, were printed this point later, but let me just read this because it is relevant to this whole process. The evolution of structures to ensure people's participation was a major concern of the NGM from its inception. The party organization before the revolution comprised a network of cells all over the country which sent elected representatives to a central assembly called the National Coordinating Council of Delegates. The party network also included the NJM-NYO, which are the National Youth Organization, the NJM's National Youth Organization, formed shortly after the birth of the NJM in 1973. The NJM, the NWO, which is a second arm of the NJM from before the revolution, National Women's Organization, which was formed in 1977, and NJM party support groups. All of these things are before the revolution, and I can assure you that after the revolution, these things did not remain party groups. These were thrown open to everybody in the country, anybody who wanted to be part. About 9 months before the revolution, the party had moved to institute parish councils in which members of these various organizations met to discuss problems facing the people of the parish, as well as broad national issues. These meetings, like much of the organizing activity of the NJM, were clandestine. When the party came to power in 1979, all of these structures moved on to the public plane. And now I myself had the privilege of taking part as a villager of St. Paul's, Grenada, in the further evolution of this system of democracy in the making. Once a month, our women's group, our NWO group, National Women's Organization group, would put it together, put up, our money and hire a maxi and proceed with great excitement to this meeting, which was called Parish Council. People from all parts of the parish would converge there to give their views on the progress of the country in general and to bring up problems in their community, or to report back on solutions that had been brought to bear arising out of the previous parish council. People look forward to this assembly because it was, it was continuing that tradition of assemblies that the NJM had started, and we just thoroughly enjoyed this whole thing. Thoroughly enjoyed. After a few months, what happened was that the parish councils had grown so large to standing room only because people just flowed in. The people really loved that, They had grown so large that these councils had to be broken up into village councils. Members of the leadership and technical people from various ministries were always in attendance. The development of an actual system of governance which was supposed to have become official or would have become official if the revolution had not been shut down, was only a part of the work in progress. All the while that those things were being done, developing village council and parish council and all of that, while that work was being done other work was being done to create the conditions in which a truly participatory democracy could grow and flourish. And this was that, to this end, creating participatory democracy. The following approaches became national policy and were actually being carried out. Maintaining contact between leadership and people, encouraging public discussion of national issues, expanding education based on the principle that without education, people cannot fully participate in the running of their country. That is hypocrisy. The people who were illiterate at the last election shouldn't be illiterate at the next election, because that limits their ability to participate. So that the Center for Popular Education, called CPE, was a program operated all over the country to tackle the high rate of illiteracy in Grenada. And there were, these classes were taught by volunteers, among them many school children taught older people to read and write. High school places were increased by the building of new schools, and high school fees were abolished. Provision for tertiary education increased from a one-digit number of students to a three-digit figure because revolutionary Grenada attracted so many scholarships, notably from Cuba, of course, right? Many scholarships. But we attracted scholarships from far and wide. And what also made a difference was that Grenada, which had lapsed in paying up its fees, its contribution to UE, or the regional university, was was paid up, or we began to pay up. So that Grenadian students were once more could come to the university as financial members. All right. Sorry, where am I? Okay, the specific program that I took part in was NISTEP, the National In-Service Teacher Education Program. And just to speak about that in a nutshell, as my father used to say, a nutmeg, which would be a very apt image for yes. There was a very small percentage of teachers who were trained. What used to happen is that there was a teacher, there probably still is, a teacher's college, where you would train one class, and one class would graduate, and in that same year, that same number of students would go to the States, because there wasn't much motivation for people with certain levels of education to stay in Grenada. Right? So that what was done was that we decided to have classes one day a week for all the untrained teachers who were the majority. But the trained teachers would stay in the school on that day, and they would sort of coordinate or be there to support another program called CSDP, Community School Day Program. On the day that the teachers left the school to go to their center for training, the CSDP got people in the community to come in to help the remaining teachers. And they, of course, couldn't teach what the teacher was teaching. Those who could did. But they would teach them things like, carpentry, cooking, read to them, any skill that you had, anything that you could do to help look after children. On a day when their teacher was not there, people came in and did that. Then we had 3 centers, one in the north, one in St. George's, and one in Carriacou. Another approach was the fostering of group activity, the habit of association. The atmosphere of the revolution stimulated the formation of countless new groups and the revival of groups which had become defunct. And then, of course, as part of its economic policy, the government pursued the creation of a cooperative sector. And I'm just going to once more quote from somebody here. This is a Trinidadian who, like me and like Don and like many others, packed up, family, child, belongings and went. This is Regina Dumas, and I'm going to mention the name of her book afterwards in the list. Where does it start? Okay, she is the person who ran an institution created especially for the purpose of developing and encouraging cooperatives, the National Development Agency, NACDA. All right. So she gives a little description of it here. Noting the twin problems of joblessness and landlessness among the youth sectors of the society, the PRG had created a program designed to respond to these 2 key problems. The National Cooperative Development Agency, NACDA, with its slogan, "Idle Lands for Idle Hands." Right? And this program was instituted with me, which is Regina, as the director of the program. Yes, and she did an amazing job. Okay, I'm almost done. This is really almost the end. Okay. I forget where I left off. So yes, well, the last thing I talked there about was cooperatives, which became a part of the economic policy, and of course also carried out the objective of nurturing the habit of acting together, collective action, cooperation. Now it is impossible to present here a full picture of what was achieved in the Grenadian Revolution. You really need to see some of the books that I have listed here. There are many more. There's just too much to tell. The revolution was written about while it was taking place by a number of people who either visited or were there for the whole duration. They wrote books, articles, printed speeches, chapters in books, and these are just a few of them. There were people who wrote books after they published them after the revolution. Some people who wrote it, looking back, but they will have been there and will have had the experience. Now the most recent one that I know about actually is Regina's book, and it's a substantial chapter in the autobiography of this woman, an old friend of mine, Regina Dumas, who went to Grenada with her children. Her book is called Memoirs of a Cocoa Farmer's Daughter. And a large chunk of the book is a chapter called Grenada and My Experience of the Grenada Revolution. And that's the book I just read from. There was also, there are also one early publication was the book Grenada, the Peaceful Revolution by the EPICA Task Force. Now, EPICA is the acronym for an organization based in the US called the Ecumenical Program for Inter-American Communication and Action. That was published in 1982. And there's another EPICA book authored by Catherine Sunshine, published in 1985. That one is called The Caribbean Survival, Struggle and Sovereignty. These 2 books give a very positive and balanced portrait of the revolution. And the books are enriched and enlivened by photographs and interviews with actual Grenadians at the time of the revolution. Then there's this book that was put together after the revolution called A Caribbean Reader on Development. Well, I'm not going to return to the date now, but You know, it's a collection of essays. It isn't all about Grenada, but Grenada features in a number of them. But it's the topic of an article that I contributed, and the article, chapter is called Towards People's Participation in Caribbean Development. Right? There are chapters like, well, Carl Stone also did something on Jamaica and Grenada. And I myself co-authored with Chris Searle, who is another one who, he's from England, he's from Britain, he's a teacher in Britain. He packed up wife, children, a whole gang of children. I think they were from, his wife and children, the wife was from Caribbean, and came, you know. So he worked in Misstep as well. And the book that we co-authored is called Is Freedom Remaking, right? And you know, to just close off, quite a lot of documentation was produced, but much of it is out of print. So that whoever can take on the task of searching out and collecting these publications and having them republished and disseminating would be doing a great service to the current and future generations of the Caribbean, so that they can have a clear picture of what really went on there, right, and how really powerful it was. The progressive movement owes it to itself, and Don made the same point. I was happy to hear him make the point. The progressive movement owes it to itself to pass on the information to the younger generation and to the politicians, right? So that if we could get these books going again, we will give complimentary copies to the politicians as part of our continuing fight for the you know, and this will tremendously support and give inspiration to our continuing fight for the freedom to build as we see fit, and again, and in peace. As we see fit and in peace, I have to stress our own models of development. Thank you for inviting me to this. I forgot to say that. And kudos to David and the MSJ for doing this. You see, it's very, very important.
Indeed. Thank you, sister.
Another round of and I think you mentioned, quite a lot that was important. And the good thing is that we've captured it, so we will be able to share so much of what you said this afternoon. So one of the things that struck me is when you talked about how people remember the Grenada Revolution, either as a coup d'etat, a bloodless coup, or they remember the end result. The blood at the end, the tragedy at the end. But what you shared with us is what happened in between that. And to me, that is the most important thing about remembering the Grenadian Revolution. What happened in between there? That struggle, as you said, for a just society, the question of a period of positive development, and you gave very concrete examples in terms of education, the economy, the question of popular democracy, popular participation of people, literally shaping their own destiny. And that was so critical. And of course, you talk about making social justice a reality. And I would have heard Don also mention the whole question of social justice. So well, we have here with us the political leader of the movement for social justice. But let me just recognize our first vice president of the Oil Field Workers Trade Union, himself a Grenadian, proud one at that. Maybe during the exchange with the participants, he'd probably share his experience in terms of the Grenadian Revolution. And I see that our national icon Pearl has rejoined us, so we would also hear a few words from her a little later on. So we're looking forward. So it'll be a really rich afternoon, and then of course it's an open discussion, so anyone can share their own thoughts. But for now, please join me to bring on Comrade David Abdullah, political leader of the Movement for Social Justice.
You and Merle going first was the best batting order for this afternoon's discussion, because it was important for everyone. First of all, those of us who are older, and a number of older ones here in the audience as well, to remember, because often we forget as well a lot of the details And the details that Merle provided were very, very important because I had forgotten some of those details myself. And to understand, therefore, the real content of the Grenadian Revolution and why it was so important for all of us. And I will never forget the discussion a couple of days before the 19th of October that George Weeks had. I placed the call to actually, at that time we had the political organization, the Committee for Labour Solidarity, so the entire leadership of the CLS, including Alan Alexander, Lennox Spear, George Weeks, Rafiq Shah, Aaron McLeod, Teddy Belgrave, Lyle Townsend, and so on. We gathered at Cecil Paul's house, actually, in Sawan, and I placed the call to Bernard's house. Morris was under house arrest, and Selwyn Strawn answered the phone, and I asked if Bernard would come to the phone. He said no, and George Weeks then spoke to Selwyn, pleaded first of all to speak to Bernard, but Selwyn refused to allow Bernard to come to the phone, or said Bernard was not there or not prepared to come to the phone, though the call went directly to Bernard Court's home. And George begged, and this is George Weeks, who was the elder, if you wish, because of 1970 and the struggles of the Union in the 60s and so on. And therefore George was an elder to Morris and to everyone else in the Grenadian Revolution. And the OWTU itself had contributed in various ways, both before and after, to the Grenadian Revolution. So George begged and pleaded, first of all, that no harm should come to anyone, and had said that he and Rafiq and others were prepared to come in as mediators to try to resolve that internal conflict that had developed and had become very, very antagonistic, and as it turned out, was going to be violent, but we sensed it was heading in that direction. And Strawn basically said, it was a Sunday afternoon, so Morris was killed on a Tuesday, the 19th was a Tuesday, if my memory serves me right. So this must have been the Tuesday, the 18th, the 17th. And Selwyn basically said, Strawn said, Morris went too far, etc., etc., etc. And H.A. will be making a statement, so listen to the radio later tonight. And that was the response to Comrade Weeks' on behalf of many other persons pleading for that intervention. So I just thought I'd mention that and then make the point that what George had said is that not only would, if that conflict was not resolved peacefully and in unity, then it would set back not just the Grenadian Revolution, but set back the entire progressive movement in the Caribbean. That was the point that George was making, because the Grenadian Revolution was so important, both psychologically for Caribbean people, as both Don and Bird have said. People went there and were enthusiastic and excited. But the slogan that emerged many decades afterwards by the social movements, that another world is possible, that idea was made reality during the period of the Grenadian Revolution. That we could have a very small island in the Caribbean engaged in a type of development which was challenging the traditional political and economic and social relations that had been established in the period of colonialism and which were reinforced post-independence by a state that was really a neo-colonial state, and with all of the economic relations remaining the traditional plantation economic relations. And Grenada was saying that there was another way, and was therefore offering a lot of hope to people in the Caribbean. And that was what George was saying, that if you allow this thing to deteriorate any further, then that hope would be destroyed or set back for many, many generations. And I have no doubt in my own mind that the way in which the Grenadian Revolution ended, and prior to that, the assassination of Walter Rodney, in 1980, that those two events were critical to the reversing and the weakening of the progressive movements right throughout the region. But we don't have time to go into that now. I've written about that and spoken about that elsewhere. Let me just say that in terms of lessons, because I really wanted us to identify some lessons coming out of the Grenadian Revolution experience. One was, for us, how do we go about this challenge of bringing about fundamental change in the economic, social and political relations of power? How do we create a participatory democracy that Merle was speaking about with the parish councils, and a budgetary process where people gathered in the dome on Grand Anse? The dome, for those who don't know, was the Grenadian equivalent of our Queen's Hall, right? Not nearly as sophisticated as Queen's Hall, but it was the equivalent. The cultural center in Grand Anse, and people gathered in the dome for all kinds of activities, cultural activities and so on, but also to discuss the budget. So it wasn't like we having the Minister of Finance dropping the budget on budget day and nobody knows what the budget is going to say and there's no accountability after that and so on and so on. It was a participatory process. So how do you create a participatory political process of democracy? How do you change the economic relations of power so that you don't have, for example, at TSTT, the CEO getting $200,000 a month at the same time that almost 700 people are retrenched and so on. And that's just an example of a state enterprise. I didn't even address the issue of when I heard Christian Moutet on television last night speaking about, or night before, at the opening of the new mini food mall in Trin City by the roundabout, and he talked about promoting our brands. And what he was, all the brands that Christian Moutet's Prestige Holdings, which is KFC, Starbucks, Pizza Hut, TGIF, which are American brands, but he was saying our brands. And so how do we break that type of economic relationship of power where we have even more deeply integrated now into Western capitalist economy, the US consumer economy that we were in the 70s. Yes, and Gregory Maguire is here and he will tell you the struggles he has trying to sell his rum liqueur, right, in competition to Bailey's and all the other liqueurs, and the power relations that the supermarkets have that wouldn't allow that to be sold in the supermarkets, but you know, promoting the foreign brands and so on and so on. So it is at so many different levels, cultural, the social relations of violence, which have become so much worse now in our society than they were in 1979 and so on. And power relations between men and women, between adults and children, and so many other things that have to be transformed. So the question arises, how do we challenge that status quo and transform the status quo into a society, as the principles of the NJM had said in '79, a society that is more equitable and where there is social justice and peace and so on. And when we, of course we can't answer that question now. Obviously some of us have some ideas, but that remains centrally the challenge for progressive movements. It was begun to be achieved in Grenada between '79 and '83, but it hasn't happened anywhere else in the English-speaking Caribbean whatsoever. So that's a challenge that remains, and we have to continue to work towards that. A weakness, in my view, was the fact that, and it was given time, it would have been done, because Alan Alexander, who passed away 3 years ago, I think it was, 2-3 years ago, senior counsel, Alan, close friend, personal friend of Morris, but also politically, very close to Morris and the Grenadian Revolution for many years, his mother being Grenadian, and Alan being an attorney together with Morris and another then young attorney, one Bobby Clark, whose daughter is here with us, and Richard Small from Jamaica, and Miles Fitzpatrick from Guyana, were a core of young progressive lawyers who fought social justice issues, human rights issues, workers' rights issues right throughout the Caribbean. And I know that Bobby had gone into Grenada just after the revolution, of course, because of their relationship politically and personally with Morris and so on. I was there, you know, in a semi-attorney general position, even though there was no formal thing after the revolution like that for a little while. But Alan went in, was asked by Morris and the PRG sometime in '83 to be the, if I'm not mistaken, the sole Constitution Reform Commissioner. But that process never got off the ground. And to me, that was one of the critical things that would have ensured the continuity of the revolution had it happened, because it would have institutionalized the relationships between the cabinet and the parish councils and a whole series of things like that, and therefore institutionalized in a constitutional and legal way the popular power structures and so on. And we had in the CLS at the time, because Alan was a member of the steering committee of the CLS, we had major discussions about that. And I remember it was Lennox Spear, another lawyer and a Marxist and so on, who was one of the most important people in this country, and whose memory we have to keep alive as well. Lennox said to Alan, and in our discussions, Lennox said, we have to work out how we make people sovereign, because it can't be that the Parliament is sovereign. That's the Westminster notion, that Parliament is sovereign and so on. How do we make the people sovereign? And Lennox was talking therefore about a parliamentary, or two houses of parliament, one being where the people would have direct representation in a quote-unquote Senate type arrangement. And he said that is how the dictatorship of the people, he didn't say proletariat dictatorship, but the people have to be expressed. So Lennox was using his Marxist analysis to try to develop, in the context of our Caribbean culture and experience and so on, how people's power could be entrenched. And I never forget the discussion at the ODBQ headquarters in July of '83, because there was CARICOM heads of government met in Trinidad and Tobago in July of '83. So Morris came and the ODBQ hosted a reception for him. It was really supposed to be...
I was there 2 days, I remember that.
You were there, okay.
I was there that period, yes.
Right. And it was supposed to be for Grenadian members of the ODBQ.
Right.
Right? And of course, executive members and branch officers, general counsel officers. And so the middle floor of Paramount, we were expecting about 300 people, but were about 700 people short. Everybody claimed to be Grenadian that day. it was crazy. But it was a very powerful. Morris spoke at length at Paramount Building, and then we went upstairs to the conference room upstairs. And Lennox said to Morris, never forget that exchange, Lennox, because all part of the issue of democracy and so on. Lennox said, Morris. And so Lennox is speaking both as a lawyer, one of the foremost constitutional lawyers in Trinidad and Tobago, and as a Marxist coming out of the 40s and 50s and so on. And as a cultural person, because Lennox Spear was the person who started TASPO and who was working with, the TASPO used to practice down at where Paragon is now, where the Trinidad Youth Council had its headquarters, and Lennox and his wife Dolly were the wardens of the Trinidad Youth Council. And the Trinidad Youth Council organized lecture recitals by Edric Connor and a whole range of things. But anyways, I've digressed. So Lennox said to Morris, you can't have socialism in Grenada, because the working class of Grenada resides in the oil fields of Trinidad. Right? A very important and profound political statement, because the only groups of workers in the industrial sense in Grenada was Coca-Cola factory, the docks, I suppose, and the small number of electricity workers, and so on. There were no other industrial workers of that, so there was no proletariat in that sense.
Right. With all due respect to our comrades and friends from the other Caribbean countries, you cannot gainsay that the relationship between Grenada and Trinidad fits into a very special category for the reasons you just mentioned. And that continues up to today.
Yes.
You know, that continues up to today. So this is, what you're doing today is so critical to join also the links between the two countries, the two cultures, etc. But sorry to interrupt you.
No, thanks Don for that, yeah. So that issue was, I think, a weakness that existed. The last one I want to make is about the ideological and political tendencies that went into the formation of the New Jewel movement. Because Morris had, before the New Jewel movement, his own political organization, which was the Movement for the Assemblies of the People. And a lot of those principles that Merle read out in terms of participatory process, assemblies of the people, and so on, came, my understanding, and I'm saying this not firsthand, I'm saying this from my own assessment, came from Morris's own political tradition, if you wish, of Movement for the Assemblies of the People, which would have been influenced, I think, by people like, and I'm guessing here now a bit, people like Tim Hector and others. Tim, of course, having been very close to C.N.R. James, and therefore that notion of every cook can govern, and people's power from below, and the self-organization of people was a very important element of Morris's ideological position from the movement of the Assemblies of the People. The other element, the other key force that created the New Jewel movement was Unison Whiteman, who was also assassinated, murdered on October 19th, up at the fort. He was Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time. And Unison Whiteman had his political organization, which was a joint endeavor for the welfare and education for liberation, right, which was JEWEL. Right, the acronym being JEWEL, but it was a joint endeavor for, I believe, for welfare, education, liberation. Yes, so JEWEL and Movement for the Assembly of the Peoples joined to form the New Jewel movement. Now, somewhere in that context, because Bernard was in Trinidad at UE, lecturing on international relations, and I remember organizing, I was president of the Guild, if I'm not mistaken, of protests and so on, when his work permit was not renewed. And he then left Trinidad and went to Jamaica because his wife Phyllis was being Jamaican, got a part-time job at Mona. And myself and Brian Meeks had gone to Jamaica for university meetings, being president of the Guild, representing the Guild. And myself and Brian Meeks took Bernard Cole to meet with Trevor Monroe. Okay? So my understanding from talking to John LaRose, who knew Bernard in England, because New Beacon Books published Bernard's book about how the British education system made West Indian children academically subnormal. Yes, Bernard did an important piece of research on that, which New Beacon published. And John was very clear that in the UK, and our understanding of Bernard when we interacted with him at UE was that Bernard was not then a Marxist, okay? And that developed when he was in Jamaica sometime around 1974, 75. So so within the New Jewel then, you had a third element, which was Orel, which was Cord's organization, which was the Organization for Revolutionary Education for Liberation, I think, yes? And that was Cord's faction within the New Jewel movement. And I want to suggest therefore that there were different ideological and political trends that were within the Jewel, which eventually emerged in conflict in '83, but we don't have time to discuss all of that. And just to say that I agree 100% with Merle that March 13th, 1979 was the result of the repression, because there was Bloody Sunday, yes? 1973 was it, when or 74, when people, Morrison Day had a peaceful demonstration, if I'm not mistaken, on at Seymour in that area there, and they were badly beaten. People were very badly beaten because there was a general strike. There was a general strike which had been supported by the business community, and Morrison Day were part of that, with respect to the independence of Grenada, the independence constitution, yes, and Gary's thugs and the police beat people mercilessly. And then there was another protest action where students were taking part of it in St. George's, when Morris's father was killed by a member of the Mongoose gang, when Morris's father tried to protect some school girls downtown in St. George's, and Morris's father was killed. And then, so there was a lot of repression, and then you had the denial of the parliamentary route in 76, as Merle correctly described. So March 13th really was the only option for trying to bring about, you know, a change in power, political power in Grenada. So I wanted to support Merle on that point. And I will stop there. There's so much more to be said, but we need to open up to
David, can I just steal a couple more minutes before we open up? But I think the important points on this discussion is to look at the year 1979, 40 years ago, that we're examining today. What was the world like back then, in 1979, 40 years ago? What were the correlation of forces at a global level? How do we connect the dots? How do we look at the Grenadian Revolution within the large context of the Cold War that existed back then, between the emergence of neoliberalism, particularly coming after the overthrow of Pinochet in 1973 in Chile, right, by the CIA, and the international brainchild behind that was Henry Kissinger. So there was a lot happening, beginning to happen in our region at the time that the revolution came into power. 1979 itself was quite a remarkable year. I think the Mighty Sparrow himself made a calypso of 1979. Yes, in fact, there's so many earth-shaking things that happened in 1979. I just will go down a couple of them very quickly. In January of 1979, you had the triumph of the Iranian Revolution in Iran, right, led by the Ayatollah, that ushered in the first Islamic state in the world, and still is today. Okay, 40 years later, or whatever you think of Iran, but that revolution happened in the beginning of 79. Then came Grenada, right? Then in July came Nicaragua with the Sandinistas, 1979. Just a few months after Grenada came to power. And then later on in the year, the overthrow of Idi Amin in Uganda, in Africa. All of these things happened in the same year. You know, it is quite remarkable. But I wanted us to reflect on that and to see how far we have come since then, you know. But I had the opportunity of traveling. Let me just say this. The impact that the Grenadian Revolution had on this kind of world 40 years ago was truly disproportional, enormous to its size, right? To its size. As a small Caribbean country, it was amazing. So, and I traveled around the world with Maurice as his press secretary, and I could see this firsthand in the various meetings that we had with heads of state, high government level officials, the conferences, like the UN, annual UN General Assembly conference, the non-aligned meetings around the world, that we all, Grenada had a presence, a formidable presence in all of these global fora. As you say in boxing terms, we were punching way above our weight back then, you know. So I just wanted to contextualize it in terms of global history of the period 40 years ago.
Thanks so much, Don. It was important to remind us of the global context back then, because we have to look at the global context now. It's similar when we think of what is happening or what has been happening in Latin America and the rise of right-wing policies and imperialism. It's almost 40 years later, and we are back in that kind of hostile world. But I think it has to do with, as humans, struggling to determine what kind of world we want to build, what kind of society we want to build. And clearly, Maurice Bishop and the Grenadians decided on their own path in '79. And so I guess these are some of the fundamental questions we have to ask ourselves today. And I think, David, when you were talking about how do we bring about fundamental change, how do we change the economic relations of power, and then you gave a very concrete example as to what is our society right now. But I want to open it up a little bit. I do believe the Cuban ambassador wanted to say something very short, something she found with Fidel. And then I believe that our Pearl wanted to share something with us as well. So we open it up to the floor. And we're going to get a second mic. So we're going to move the mic to the center seat. To the mic.
Thank you very much for the invitation. We really appreciate the invitation to see today. It's a privilege also for us as journalists, not just being in protection, but also for my colleague to be here and listen to the testimonies.
Go closer to the mic.
From people who was there, people that has
Still can't hear.
testimony of the history. And we really appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation. And we would like to also remember. I'd like to share fragments of the speech that our commander-in-chief in November. Okay, thank you. In the farewell of duel to the fallen heroes on equal fight against the imperialism in Grenada, I would like to share some fragments of that moment. The United States government despised Grenada and hated Bishop. It wanted to destroy the process and example of Grenada. He had even prepared military plans to invade the island, as Bishop denounced almost 2 years ago. This is in November 1883. But he found no pretexts. The United States was creating pretexts. I was remembering when she was talking why they didn't do it in me, that they were creating also pretexts in order to yes, as they, I'm quoting this because it's happening nowadays. Yes. The story is going on. To justify the invasion of Grenada and its subsequent acts, the United States government and spokesman said 19 lies. And he quotes the lies. For example, American students were in danger of being taken hostage. Cuba had responsibility in the coup attack and the death of Bishop. The main objective of the invasion was to protect the life of the American citizens. And the airport and the construction was not civil but military. And a lot of lies that, because, and she was saying before, the machinery, and also was saying about the context and how to make all that propaganda against a project, a social project, that wanted to propose the welfare of its people. Then today, and there's also this part is very important. This in Nicaragua, over the price of 40,000 lives paid to win freedom. Almost 1,000 children of that noble people have been already died as a result of the attacks of the mercenary bands organized, trained, and supplied by the government of the United States. In El Salvador, more than 50,000 people have been killed by the genocidal regime, whose army supplied, trained, and directed by the United States. In Guatemala, more than 100,000 people have died at the hands of the repressive system installed by the CIA in 1954, when it overthrew the progressive government of Arbenz. And how many have died in Chile since imperialism promoted the overthrow and murder of Salvador Allende? How many have died in Argentina, in Uruguay, in Paraguay, in Brazil, in Bolivia in the last 15 years? How expensive it has cost our people in blood, sacrifice, misery, and mourning the imperialist domination and the unjust social system that it has imposed on our nations. And I wanted to share this because, as I was saying, the history today repeats itself. A whole conventional war is being unfolding against Venezuela. The same contraptions, creation of pretexts, fabrication of lies, misinformation, economic boycott, sanctions, sabotage. They intend to put an end to the example of the Bolivarian Revolution and the obstacle it represents for the imperial domination of our America, Nuestra America, the Martian concept, and to be able to appropriate its vast oil resources. This forum today helps not to forget the sad and painful history that our people have lived, and the history that teaches us, that reminds us, that tells us with a strong voice what the real imperial purposes are in the region. I wish to conclude with a sentence of this speech I was saying before. Imperialism insists on destroying symbols because it knows the value of symbols, of examples, of ideas. But symbols, examples, ideas cannot be destroyed. And when their enemies believe they have destroyed them, what they have actually done is multiply them. So we thank you very much again. Let's honor the history of our America to preserve the future. Thank you for this. And also thank you for the words he has mentioned to the Cuban government. Thank you.
Her Excellency Tania Diego Olite, thank you very much for reminding us of the words of the Comandante himself, Fidel Castro. As we all know, Fidel and Maurice were very, very close. And I think that came out in all the different interactions from all of the panelists in terms of the role that Cuba played in assisting that project. And also to remind us, of course, that imperialism is a real thing. In case we think it's something we read in our history books about Nicaragua in the 70s or Grenada in the 80s, it is unfolding in our lifetime right now as we speak. So I think it's very apt that we are having this forum, and the relevance of this forum and the relevance of the symbol of the Grenadian Revolution and what it meant and what it continues to mean to all of us. So I think I would like to invite Pearl, and then I'll ask Roberta, who has also would like to make an intervention.
Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm grateful for the discourse of Dawn and Noel and David. I just want to I have a poem that I wrote for Maurice, and David will remember it was the very night of the morning of which he was killed, and we gathered in Woodford Square and bawled and bawled, and it is still very emotional for me. I want to speak as an artist. The time of the revolution was a very exciting and fulfilling one for us. People like Merle Collins, Merle, Andaye, Laming, Gugi Wathiongo, people from the region came to Grenada. I heard more calypso in Grenada on the radio than in Trinidad. I heard my poetry more often on the radio in Grenada than in Trinidad. When Maurice was killed in October, I was preparing. I had done a stage version of CLR's Mintiani, which was shown at OWTU, and Nello himself had been there. and Maurice wanted it in Grenada. And I was doing the rehearsals here with people like Errol Jones and all these great artists who had given time and energy to Grenada. And we heard the news, and I've been trying to call Jackie, trying to call Maurice, trying to call Noel. I can't reach anybody. And then that fateful morning, even from the inception of the revolution, and I'm glad that David talked about it, there were ideological differences that were clear and painful, and that caused the revolution to implode. And as Merle said, Maurice came out of the assembly of the people. He believed, he validated the culture. He believed in the institutions of our people. The Combine, the Convoy, the Panchayats. He believed in those things as institutions in which we could govern ourselves without necessarily looking outside for ideologies which were alien to the way our people live. And that implosion was what destroyed the greatest thing that could happen in the region. And I, as an artist, remain very bitter about it. Because the revolution was not only Grenada. We in NJAC had great links with the NJN. And Daye, and Suka, Guyana, in Guyana were part of the NJN. People in Yulu that we call St. Vincent. And there was a kind of burgeoning of people power that all was destroyed by this stupid ideological infighting that destroyed the greatest thing that could have happened in our region. And we still keep looking outside of our people for ways to govern ourselves. Yes. When our peoples, our traditions, we have created the institution. If we would just look inside ourselves rather than outside. I have no more tears. Those ducks have been put through a river of pain. My soul has bled for Walter Rodney, Mikey Smith, for Beverly Jones, for Basil Davis, for Guy Harewood, and many more. Now for Maurice Mojaki. My generation bleeds, giving blood in hope of giving life. I have no more tears as mother. I feel my womb twist in pain for those who mourn sons, daughters. As woman, I feel the aching in my guts for those who lose husbands, lovers. As child, I feel the fearful void of parents gone to green, the earth they loved. I have no more tears, but still they come unbidden. Run out from my entrails, leaving the painful guts dry, flaccid, still seeking to find the courage to go on through mists of tears that will not be denied. My generation bleeds. The bravest, strongest, spill their blood in hope, and powers large loom to fight battles of ideology in carried lands, and powers large loom to push alien concepts in our midst, the line oft incanted myths of sovereignty. I watch my generation bleed. I cry inside, Maurice, Maurice, Maurice. I have no more tears. But still they come unbidden. History recycled, Danton, Robespierre, Bolsheviks, Meneliks, Louverture, Christophe. Black blood shedding, vain pursuit of alien ideologies, all armed to re-enslave. Power tool dons the masks of ideology. In search of power, we turn into our own entrails, eat our own flesh, drink our own blood from ritual calabashes, grind our own bones to dust. Uplifted to the heights of power. The love power fades, neglected. The love power fades, rejected now as weakness. And frightened people face this final holocaust, fearing even to cling together in love, that alone can save us. I have no more tears, but still I have cause to weep.
Straight from the heart. It just goes to show how much and how deep the Grenadian Revolution meant to us here in this region, the Caribbean. I believe, Roberta, you wanted to say something, and then I saw...
Say from here or?
No.
No?
Because we are taping everything. Yeah. We can put the mic in it. You'll be alright with that?
Yes, that's all.
Their assessments of what they needed and the patterns that they should follow. What do you call them for factor again? No, but I mean, in the split there to RMC.
RMC. Yes, RMC.
What that stands for again? I can't remember. Revolutionary Military Council.
Yeah, Revolutionary Military Council. Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes. I mean, all right. And I think that, you know, I like the word you use, doctrinary, but that's a word that is always in my head about that. That they would have liked to see it, see the revolution filed under one political ideology. Whereas I don't think that they I don't know, it's difficult to put it into words, but you know, doctrinaire arguments is the actual. Yes, I don't know, I think that Donald...
Yeah, I wanted to just chime in and say, I agree with you on that doctrinaire point. But at the risk of sounding over simpler about this, I think that people would understand more if we were to say, and it is accurate, that Maurice and those around him were more enamored, were more impressed with the type of socialist model that was being practiced in Cuba, as opposed to the type of socialist model that prevailed in the Soviet Union and in other Soviet countries. There was a tendency on the part of those who supported Bernard and by extension, Trevor Monroe from Jamaica, who was a very important ideological influence on Bernard and his supporters even before the revolution came to power. They tended to look more towards Moscow for their guidance and for their models, and became enchanted with what we thought was a model that would never work in the concrete context of the Grenadian history and of Grenadian culture. So there was that rift, there was that tension, that difference as well. But she's right, there was nothing doctrinaire about Maurice Bishop's approach to these questions, as long as he was absolutely fixated on the question of involving the masses of people of Grenada in everything that revolution did. Involve the masses, involve the masses. That was his mantra. And he was more concerned about the popularity at the grassroots level of the revolution than with the fine points of ideological debate.
I just want to say one other thing.
The mic is off.
Mic is off.
But is this mic on?
Yeah, I could see it. I could hear it. Yeah.
And once again, it is hard for me to put it into words, but that business of free speech and the detaining of people and all of that, I've given that a lot of thought, but let me see how I can project it. I was there and I understand better how people's revolutions and people's alternative paths can get distorted in a way into those things. People would try to, you know, there were some people, and I never heard it expressed myself, but you know, the question of elections, all right? I think that may have been an arguing point as well, because what somebody, you know, quite close to the people, I don't mean the people in the broader sense, but somebody who was quite close to the leadership told me that one of the reasons that they clamped down on Morris is that he began talking about holding an election soon. And the thing is that they saw elections as well as other things, and the famous freedom of speech. There are many things that they saw as creating ways in for the U.S. to work their way. I can neither defend it nor condemn it. What I'm saying is that I understand why under harassment and being under siege, you know, creates these things which I suppose we see as the distortions. And they were, I suppose, distortions because we take those things for granted. All right? So I don't know if that is enough, but what I can say is that I was there and I can see why that happens in regimes, especially, not especially, in regimes where a country is trying to take a path different from what the U.S. approves of. I'm happy that John was able to do the expansion of the point of view, because Morris was accused of abandoning the revolution and undermining the revolution and all of that because he would not subscribe to something that was ready-made. Yeah.
Thanks. Let me just add two quick things to that. One, that Merle mentioned the sense of siege. I remember going in once for a meeting, and I went in and Vincent Well met me at the airport, or was passing by and picked up at the airport, something like that. And of course, Vincent was assassinated. He was murdered on October 19th. He was actually to deliver the feature address at the ODQ's annual conference of delegates on the 23rd or 24th, and he was murdered on the 19th of October. So when Vincent picked up, he was driving himself, but on his back seat, he had his AK-47 on the back seat, right? Now, when I asked him about it, it was in the context of a real fear by the leadership of an imminent invasion. There was a very real sense that something was going to happen. And this was after June 13th, June 19th, June 18th, around there, 1980, if I'm not mistaken, where there was a rally and there was a bomb under the stage.
Yeah, June 19th.
June 19th. And there was a young girl who was killed, and a number of others, a schoolgirl, if I remember, and a number of others were badly injured. So I think one of the things, and part of the warfare thing is also psychological warfare that generates a dynamic amongst the leadership, which also has other impacts. I can't measure them, I can't judge them. I'm just saying that my view there was really that sense of them being under siege and so on. Some of the questions about the doctrine, I think, but I'll leave that maybe for the
Thank you. I'd like to invite Gregory and then Phyllis. All right. As he makes his way, just to say we must that part about the siege warfare. The United States have mastered that. They know exactly, once they see something new that is not their thing, they have mastered that art. And we have to be very careful as we analyze things, that we do not analyze it in isolation too.
Hi, good evening everyone. Good afternoon, sorry. This is for me an emotional moment, because I really wanted to come here when I was given the invitation. And it's because I was one of the early volunteers in Grenada. At that time I was at UWI, completing a master's degree. And I packed up thesis and everything, and I just packed my bags and I went to Grenada. I did it for two reasons. One is because I wanted to be part of that movement. And secondly, because I'm Grenadian, or at least from Grenadian roots. Both my parents are Grenadian. And I had family there. So that it was important for me to make my contribution once given the opportunity. I don't know if you recall that Trevor Farrell was then working with the government, and he took myself and all his other graduate students over to Grenada. We probably worked for about 9 months in Grenada. No, it was just general economic planning. The statistics was in a mess, and everything was in a mess, and we were there putting things together. My assignment had to do with the import of petroleum products and the retail fuels market and all that kind of stuff that we had to put information together on. And so that 9 months was my contribution to the revolution. I think I want to say, just make about 3 points about my observations there and my thinking about what happened subsequently, and perhaps the lessons that I have learned during that whole experience of the Grenada Revolution. What struck me very early on in the early days was the enthusiasm of the youth, the commitment of the people of Grenada to this thing. I mean, like, everybody knew all the slogans, everybody was engaged, high spirit of volunteerism. I've never seen a people so fired up. I've simply never seen that in my lifetime, seen more people fired up. The second point is, for me, the second lesson for me was the new production system, and Warner mentioned it, and he spoke about the food processing factory, and you recall the mango nectar. I recall the soursop and the tambourine nectar. I mean, there has never been a better fruit drink in the Caribbean. I don't care what they tell me. You know, this thing was just super. And they were making this stuff and trying to grow the export market for it and so on. And of course, I didn't even know the place was going down. So it's possible for me, the lesson is for me, it's quite possible to fire up a people if you could build that spirit of nationalism and commitment and ownership in them, to do things for them, and with their stuff, and with the ingredients for them. I think it's quite possible, you know. And for me, again, the third lesson thing that I saw is what has been mentioned here earlier on about Maurice and the people, of nice things happening, but people need hope. You always have to give people a hope about the future, because the poor can't wait forever. If they have to wait for things to change, they have to have hope. And for him, that airport was the most essential piece of infrastructure for Grenada, because it meant opening up the export market, it meant more passengers, it meant more people, it meant more goods, more services, it meant a safer place. And that's why that airport is still important. I think it was just that the government of the day of today, was it Keith Mitchell that named me about after Maurice Bishop? Yeah, and I think that you know, that's a fitting tribute for him and his work in among the Grenadian people. So when I reflect on Grenada and what I saw in Grenada and what has happened in Grenada, I always think about what's happening in Trinidad. You know, how do you fire up these people here? You know, I really don't have the answer, but I must say I admire the work being done by the MSJ in terms of moving in the communities. I think, of course, you must do that work in terms of engaging the communities and engaging people. And the term I use these days is finding what people's pain points are and working on the pain points. And I think that's the most important thing that politicians need to do now. Identify what the real pain points are. And that's how you have to win people, because we can't wait for the repression that was in Grenada. I mean, part of what fired up the people of Grenada is the extent of repression under Gary. And that made sense for people to rally behind Maurice and them, because they provided that hope. But in this town, you know, we could talk about the people suffering and so on, but carnival and all that, no. Right? So, but they have genuine pain points, and I think we need to begin to look at those things in order to rally people behind us. Yeah. So that's my contribution. Thank you very much.
I never knew that I was leader. Yeah, I didn't know that. But I like McGuire. But I'm liking how everybody's linking. So it's not just a nostalgic reminiscence of 40 years ago, but people are linking in a concrete way our own realities. Yeah, I think that is powerful. Let me invite Ola Kele.
Pleasant afternoon to all. Ola Kele Masutungi. Greetings and thanks to the BIGW, to OWTU, to Movement for Social Justice, for all the panelists, Your Excellency, and all involved. And one of the things I want to suggest here, and it came up several times from Don and other people, whereas the specific is the Grenada Revolution, it is obvious from all the linkages you've been made that it is more than a Grenada Revolution. In fact, Caribbean people from 1937, as a new era, from 1937 coming up to the current moment, there have been several pieces of revolutionary action taking place for workers to define for themselves their rightful place in the scheme of things, where those who labor must hold the reins. So one of the things that we need to do is to have proper tools of analysis of our current situation, so that we will be able to now utilize this analysis to be able to take or create a forum or a medium of moving forward. And to me, one of the mistakes that we have made continuously, and Akbar N2 has made some references to it, yourself have made some references to it, in the sense that in drawing examples of Comrade Maurice, some people were saying he was using the medium that the people like, things that were current here. And in fact, in the 10-point program that you placed, and that 10-point program is important because you would also see that in the Black Panthers Party, they had a 10-point program. You would see the same revolutionary spirit, and in fact, the last two that you called, you don't have to look at it in public now. You will see exactly he was really looking for the liberation of a people globally. So one of the things that people that we are analyzing, which is ourselves, the word that we use and the methodology that we use to analyze, we use something that is based on matter, material, and property only, and we forget that we have spirit. Spirit is part of the paradigm. All of the old world peoples and all of the new world peoples. In other words, from the indigenous people, Warab, Kalinago, Tolmecs, Incas, all of those in the Americas, North and South, had a spiritual base. And it was that spiritual base that helped them to fight their revolution. But white people have a spiritual base too. Because even the American Revolution, Madame Blavatsky and all these people had an agenda that they were pushing inside America. So I suspect that to a large extent, that unless this new paradigm of analysis of our situation involves the spiritual paradigm and therefore utilizes the mechanisms provided with the spiritual paradigm in conjunction with that on the material paradigm, that it will work. And a lot of what was spoken about the revolution was also said, especially in Grenada, that culture was a big thing. So I'm going to close with this statement by a fellow called Professor Yusef Ben Yochanan. Because when we start to talk spiritually or religion, and some people say that, well, no, that I don't think I work with. Even Kwame Ture, who promoted scientific socialism as his pathway, one of the things that Professor Ben says is that religion It's quality identified. Thank you.
Rich discussion coming from the floor, so I'm encouraging. We have a few minutes still. I will take about 3-4 more.
Put on your mic.
It is on.
But you said it's not coming through here.
Oh, it's probably okay. How is this?
Yes, talking.
All right. So we still have a few minutes for a few more interventions. So let me invite again from the floor anybody who want to just say a few words or ask a question. As you can see, the panelists, all of them are willing to answer even the very difficult questions, the hard questions that has to be asked. Yeah, come. Because we're going to have like a closing statements. Yeah, all right, so.
Thank you, comrade. Good afternoon, all comrades. I just have 2 questions quickly. One for the comrade Don. Sorry? David Forbes, General Secretary, Postal Workers Union. Comrade Don, I would have heard you say earlier on of the general experience of the comrade, Bishop. But can you share with us briefly the whole question of your personal interaction with him in terms of, how you would have worked with him and how he would have worked with you in terms of social justice?
Yes.
Wait, hold on.
And the other question to Sister Merle, I would have heard you make mention of the IMF. And of course you would have given a brief in terms of the unemployment issue and the question of how the IMF would have given statements relative to GDP. Can you tell us if the Bishop-led government at the time would have borrowed from the IMF? Because I'm not certain about that. Okay. Well. Right, okay, thank you for sharing that. Because I heard you really, that raised a red flag for me as it relates to the issue of that year. Sure. So thank you very much.
Alright, that's what I'm done. Before you answer, we'll just take a couple more so that you can factor responding to those questions as part of the closing. I think that will be...
Okay.
Yeah? Right. Yeah. Gregory, and I'm going to... 2 more, right? Alright, that's 1, 2... Going once, going twice. Alright.
Party done.
Right, good afternoon everyone. I'm Gregory Fernandez from the MSJ. Yes, my issue is, the whole question of the Caribbean's position on Caribbean unity in this period here where we have Al Capone running the US, right? Because, he's threatening everybody and the whole question of sanctions, they're talking about using secondary sanctions for anybody who don't support them, what they want to do in Venezuela, etc. And the whole question of Caribbean unity, because even though CARICOM took a united position recently, I am not too sure that within CARICOM it also have different tendencies, right? Because it have some who prepared to bow to the US pressure because, they see, they're not prepared to stand up, right? Even though they know it's bullying going on. I mean, up to yesterday, the US government said they're banning the ICC, the International Criminal Court. They're banning them from coming to the US, taking away their visa, because they want to investigate America for war crimes, right? So, and this bullying attitude, right? Particularly in this period where this whole America first thing is the USC that they decline, the rise of China, etc. I think if you look at the history of the world, it's a quite dangerous period when you have superpowers where one might be getting ahead of the next. And the one would decline in trying to reimpose the position all over the world. Right? So, I mean, we have to look at that and see what we also need to do to strengthen Caribbean unity in this situation. Because to me, the Caribbean has been one of the places to, because of the, as Merle was saying, we could punch, above our weight on the international scene. So our position as a united CARICOM, which represents about 19 votes or whatever, is important in the international economic forums, where we can help restrain the violence of the US against peoples all over the world. And I think it's important for us to come up with a position to also strengthen Caribbean unity in this period. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for reminding us about that. I saw that yesterday. And I really want us to, as we reflect on Grenada 40 years on, let that sink in a bit, because I saw it yesterday, that they banned the ICC investigators from coming to the United States to investigate war crimes committed in Afghanistan, I mean, let that sink in. Could you imagine if any other country could go out their thoughts and say they're going to ban the International Criminal Court investigators from coming to investigate your country for war crimes? You'll be demonized, and in fact, they would look for a quick invasion. Syria. So, I mean, it is real. Now, this is the point we're making, that we are not having an abstract discussion or theoretical discussion. We are not like in a room of historians just reflecting on times of a time of the past. We are speaking about real things that are happening right now in our region that can cost the bloodshed of thousands of people right here in our region. So, having said that, let me invite the last intervention from the floor. First Vice President of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, Comrade Carlton Gibson, who himself, like Maguire.
Thank you, Chair. And, just sitting there and thinking back, as a young, well, I'm a Caribbean man. My father is Gibson, and he's Bajan, right? His father is Bajan. And I talk about the Bajan invasion, going to Tobago and interfering with Tobago and so on, flying fish and so on. But on the greater side, I am a Let and a Radix. My grandmother was Let, and she married a Radix from St. George's. I grew up in Grenada and was involved in the youth movement in Grenada prior to the revolution in 1979. So I left Grenada on the run in 1976. I was involved, I was present when Morris' father got killed at Otway House on the Carnage. And I had to deal with the famous Mongoose gang, Dudley Passy and all those guys, Bob Brisson, kind of Pumpkin Vine family. But the whole question about Grenada and that movement, the young people in Grenada, what took place prior to the revolution, the building up to 1979. I was also a foundation member of the Jewel movement, led by Eunice Whiteman, who was a kind of Pumpkin Vine family. We also taught me at Presentation College in Grenada. And the Jewel movement could have pushed the politics just that far. It was basically an agricultural group, organized, grassroots. And when Morris and Kendrick Radix and the other guys came in from their studies abroad, they came into the movement and in bigger proposal, coming in as the movement, the MAP, right? The movement of the Assemblies of People, that there was that synergy and there was similarity, and they came together to form the new Jewel. I was also a part of that new Jewel, right? So there was a grouping. Unfortunately, Calder was able to pull aside and to get some of these guys in Orel. I knew them. In fact, 2 months ago, I met one of the butchers of St. George's, Eric Heddick Lynn. He's now an attorney here, and we're not to Grenada. It was a classmate of mine, Yeah, he was a classmate, right? And some of these guys, what came out, it's sad that they were able to get involved in that kind of gathering, the poison. A lot of things cannot be said here today. A lot of things happened in this revolution. There are people who were poisoned. I mean, a lot of good friends and family members who were killed because of their closeness to Morris and the grassroots. Morris was just that. He was a nationalist. And that is one of his faults, because they said he was not Marxist enough. But he was people-oriented. It was painful. And even today, if you go back to Grenada, the grassroots, the old ladies, the old men, the citizens, the people of Grenada, they understand the importance of the revolution. And if this revolution was allowed to grow, the whole of the Caribbean would have benefited from it. It's sad that just a few could have gone out. And I asked Lane 2 months ago, I said, listen, you will believe that going that route, you give America an opportunity to come in and to kill the revolution. You eat the revolution. Young people, young people, and they were bright. Most of those guys were from Presidential College. Most of them. They were, James, and those guys, most of them were young, educated, young men. But their mission, you have to question the mission. It is sad. But notwithstanding that, Grenada made a contribution. In fact, I remember Comrade Ross, when they had the Carriacou meeting here, the whole of Dingo Martin, the whole of Point Fortin, thousands of people went to Hilton to see their Prime Minister, Morris. And the security didn't want Morris out. And and they had to come outside and tell the people, okay, But the whole of Grenada, in fact, I know people who were hiding in Trinidad. When he was in the circle, I am Trinidadian, but after the revolution, they came out, that's my Prime Minister. You see him, you're on the TV, that's my Prime Minister. And everybody was so happy to be Grenadian. Everybody was happy to be Grenadian. All of those skeletons, they came out and they identified themselves. And Grenada did that. And Grenada had to continue growing. It's not the end of the world, it's a lesson, and we have to learn from the lesson. And I'm sure, coming out of that Grenada situation 40 years ago was a young fellow, very young, that the bravery, the fearlessness in that revolution, students marched out of the college, convent ladies marched out from the high school, came down on Otway House and stood in front of these police criminals, tom-tom matus with their axe handles and so on, and faced those people and turn them off. It was sad, but at the end of the day, that revolution will always be in our minds. I will always remember Grenada, and always remember the contribution made and the comrades who gave their life for the people of Grenada and the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Gibson. I would like the panel now to respond, starting with Don, then Merle, and then David. And that will bring this very powerful forum to a close. So Don,
all right,
I'm putting you back up on the screen.
Okay. All right, dear sisters and brothers, comrades, this has been a wonderful forum, a necessary forum, a timely forum, and I want to thank in particular Comrade David Abdullah for his kind invitation to me to participate with all of you present this evening. That for me is a signal honor. I could not think of marking the 40th anniversary of the Grenada Revolution in any other fashion. Even though I am physically challenged these days with my fight against this cancer. But nonetheless, I wanted to spend this time because I feel that all of us who have survived, we need
to take out.
The US was here in the sound forum, so it's making a quick intervention.
Wrong picture.
General statements have been made already. I just want to bring up A couple, just two details. Everybody here, no? Sorry, is there a problem? Yeah. Okay, two details that I forgot to raise. I was glad that David, or maybe it was Don, who referred to the budget. The actual process there was one of the things I was involved in, although I don't know a word about economics. They used to produce, when I say they, you know, people involved in the revolution used to translate the budget into human language, and that used to be discussed at Butler House, and also in the groups that people had all over the country. So you would have an understanding of what was being done and why. Okay, that's one thing. And there was one little detail about the harassment that I remembered. We used to hear airplanes overhead. The airport was up in Pearls, and just hearing an airplane overhead, it was part of that fear that people had of the invasion that time. I actually brought my child home at a certain time, because I wasn't going to be there, because we were so expecting an invasion, right? But you understand the thing about the airplanes. Airplanes don't pass over that, didn't at that time pass over that end of the island. So you would hear planes coming and hovering low to look at you and all that kind of thing. All of that is what took place in terms of pushing you into behavior that look like betraying the ideals. Okay, I just want to say finally that I agree with Kwesi that there has to be fuller discussion of October 25th. But I think that belongs on the anniversary of October 25th. Today we're celebrating the birthday of the revolution. I mean, while we should raise it every time we talk, that a full discussion there would not be appropriate, I think, for March 13th. Okay.
Okay, I think do we have Don back? Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
I don't know how much of the very first couple of sentences.
I suggest you start completely from the beginning.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, I'll try to be very brief then. So I was saying to all of you present, I just wanted to express my sincere gratitude to Comrade David for the invitation to participate in what has been a wonderful forum. I commend him and his party for taking this initiative. I don't know if there are a whole lot of other similar discussions taking place anywhere in the Caribbean at this particular moment. Although there have been conferences and so on in other parts of the region, but doing this at the level of political activists is quite unique. And that has always been my perspective, working for the Grenadian Revolution as a journalist who is an activist who is a journalist. That's been what I bring to the table. The truths from Grenada over the past 40 years are both comfortable and uncomfortable, you know, and the final judgments are left up to our historians to come. Question of how will history judge the Grenadian Revolution? Well, in my view, history is not fixed. It is fluid. It must be understood both in the historical context and within the proper perspective. You know, we need to always try to connect the dots. That's one of the lessons I have learned from the Grenadian experience, that we live in a world. We don't just live in a tiny island or a landlocked nation. We live in a world today, you know. And there are forces in the contemporary world in which we live that change the levers. You know, they make the decisions, and we need to be aware of that. I just want to also comment very briefly on what the young man who was a grad student in Grenada, what he said about naming the airport for Bishop, which is a laudable thing, and we commend all of those who were involved in that decision. But on the other hand, you still have a government in Grenada that considers October the 25th, which is the date of the U.S. invasion, Liberation Day. They call it Liberation Day, and it is a national holiday in Grenada. That is an abomination. That is a slap in the face of the Grenadian people, both in Grenada and outside of Grenada. And that needs to be lifted up. You know, I just want to finally bring to your attention a remarkable speech that the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Kenny Anthony, gave in Grenada just within the last couple of days. And I have had a chance to read the speech. I don't know, David, we could find a way maybe to get it circulated, or the comrades in. But it's quite a remarkable speech. And very from the heart. She talks about his relationship with the Grenada Revolution and with the Grenadian revolutionaries, both with Maurice and with Bernard Ford. In the piece, he also said, it talked about the impact that it has had on the progressive and left movements throughout the Caribbean region. But also he pointed out, and I'll end this, he said now the time has come. Put aside all the differences, ideological differences, but the time has come 40 years later to elevate Maurice Bishop to the pantheon of revered revolutionaries. I'm putting from this speech that he gave. He said, "At my distance, I continue to fight the effort to search for forgiveness, to urge reconciliation, to preach tolerance, and to find peace. Long live the memory of the Grenada Revolution. May the legacy of Maurice Bishop forever remain in the hearts and breasts of men and women of Grenada, our region, and our hemisphere." And I would also say long live the memory of the Grenada Revolution. The Grenada Revolution is not by any means dead. The ideas that fueled it are very much alive, both in the minds and hearts of the Grenadian people and those outside of Grenada who continue to fight for justice. So, as Fidel used to say, Grenada is and continues to be a big revolution in a small country. And so it has dramatic and truly significant impact on our part of the world and indeed on the world as a whole. So, but what has been done today is commendable, and thank you again for the invitation to participate in this discussion.
Thank you very much, Don.
Let me also thank Don and Merle for their contributions and for all the questions and comments from the floor. There were a number of people who contributed their knowledge, their intellectual capacity and so on to the Grenada Revolution. So, for example, never want to mention Professor George Sammy, who was, of course, pioneered a lot of work in terms of using local foods and processing local foods and so on. Dr. Trevor Farrell was very much part of that process as well. And in terms of the question of the IMF, of course, virtually all countries are members of the IMF, and therefore annually the IMF will do what's known as an Article 4 consultation and produce a report or an analysis of the state of your economy. And often the IMF has a better handle of the state of your economy than a lot of people locally have a handle on the state of the economy. But just in terms of the data and so on, but their prescriptions, their policy prescriptions, of course, are very much in keeping with their own ideological and political intent. So they cannot force a country to implement their policy recommendations unless you are in debt, and therefore you go to the IMF and you borrow money, and then as part of the conditionality of the loan, you are required to implement their policy agenda. So that Grenada was not in a situation where they required IMF support by way of IMF quote-unquote loans or anything like that, and therefore they didn't have to implement any IMF programs. But the IMF would have done an annual economic assessment of the state of the Grenada economy. And that is what Merle and others have referred to. Now, there was a Grenadian economist who was working with the IMF who assisted the Grenadian government during that period, and that person was Davison Boodoo, who later on exposed the IMF statistical fraud in Trinidad and Tobago in the 80s. And when the IMF said that the relative unit labor cost of Trinidad and Tobago was at a certain level, when Boodoo claimed it was not, and on the basis of that, Trinidad and Tobago was actually squeezed out of certain kinds of loan arrangements with international donors, because international donors would not have lent Trinidad and Tobago. This would have been in the Chambers government period, 81 to 86. Because if the IMF gave you a bad report when they did the Article 4 consultation, people would not lend you because they may feel you would default. Now, I in my analysis of why the IMF did that, my conclusion, and I have no hard evidence of it, but this is my conclusion of adding up 1 and 1 and coming up with 2, was that the Trinidad and Tobago government in October of 1983 had a very progressive, and Chambers must be congratulated for a sterling position of maintaining no to US military intervention, because George Chambers was the chairman of CARICOM at the time, and there was an emergency CARICOM meeting at the Hilton. And John Donaldson related this story to Aaron McLeod and myself when we met with Johnny. Johnny was Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of National Security. When we went to him saying we wanted the support of the Trinidad and Tobago government for having the only memorial service for Morris and Jackie and Unison and Vincent and all the others who were, Norris Bain and the others who were killed. The only memorial that could be held anywhere in the Caribbean was in Trinidad and Tobago, and the OWTU organized that in December of 1983. Morris's mother came, Marbish came, and she's somebody who also needs to be held up as a remarkable woman of strength, because her husband was killed, Rupert Bishop was killed, as Carter Gibson. Morris, her son, her only son, was killed because she had 2 daughters and another daughter. And one of her grandsons was killed. Morris's son, who he had with Jackie, Vladimir, was killed in Toronto in an arbitrary kind of attack. It wasn't a political attack, I don't think it was an arbitrary attack. So she lived through her husband, her only son, and one of her grandchildren, maybe only grandson, be killed. So she was an amazing woman. But Alimenta Bishop came together with Anne, one of the daughters, to the memorial service. But John Donaldson and George Lamin gave the main tribute, spoke at that, a very important statement by Lamin. And at that discussion with John Donaldson, he gave up almost blow-by-blow account of what was happening during that CARICOM meeting here, because while Chambers and others had gotten CARICOM to a consensus to have a CARICOM team go into Grenada and had been in contact with Corn and Austin and the others, and they had agreed to have the CARICOM team come in an effort to forestall any kind of military intervention. While Siaga and Tom Adams and Eugenia and they were agreeing around that table, went out of the room and were negotiating with Reagan and the US State Department for the invasion of Grenada. And Chambers felt absolutely devastated. So I'm linking the point that Gregory Fernandez was making, because CARICOM was deeply divided as a result of that. Well, still are, but the nature of that division then had the implications of the support by the OECS and Siaga and Tom Adams for the invasion of Grenada. There were 4 governments that opposed that: Trinidad and Tobago, Bahamas under Pinley, Guyana under Burnham, and Belize, I think under George Price, if I'm not mistaken, right? And my link of what the IMF did was that was one way for the US to get back at Trinidad and Tobago. That's just my one-on-one made 5, but it might very well be so. So that's just a link, the IMF issue. And with respect to CARICOM integration and the threats, because we know that there's a Lima group, and some CARICOM members are members of the Lima group, including Jamaica. Barbados was, but they've kind of pulled out of that. St. Lucia is, and so on. Guyana is. So, with respect to that, we have upcoming in August the 8th Assembly of Caribbean People, and that will be a very important space for everyone here. We send everybody an email who's here about it wasn't gotten, because it's very important at the level of Caribbean people, we mobilize our unity at the level of the grassroots and so on, in order to try to ensure that pressure is put at the level of governments to maintain Caribbean unity and integration in the face of what is happening today. So that's just my response to Gregory's point there. The issue of the freedom of the press issue, if Roberto said that, but when the Torchlight was closed down, which was very early, Don would remember the exact date of the Torchlight, maybe 1980, the Torchlight was closed.
Yeah, it was in, no, actually it was in 1979.
Oh, 79, okay.
It was around August of 1979.
Right, and so you went in a little afterwards to start Free West India.
Right, then when I got to Grenada in October of 1979, I worked as the editor of the Free West Indian, which was then the alternative to what the revolution developed, its own voice as an alternative to the Torchlight.
Right. Now, I remember a number of us in Trinidad and Tobago were unhappy about the closure. We didn't think it was the right thing to do. And myself, Rafiq Shah, and Trevor Farrell actually went across and met with the leadership of the NGM and so on to express our views. They expressed their views. There was a difference of approach about what was the right thing, but of course it was their decision, not ours. But we just thought that it was going to raise a lot of negatives throughout the region and so on. When one of the attacks against Morris in the lead up to September 1983, when the Central Committee met to propose, and it was Liam Owusu James who proposed joint leadership, was that Morris was a petty bourgeois Democrat and could no longer carry the revolution further. And therefore you needed Bernard with his ideological clarity and strength, blah, 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 to be able to take the revolution further.
That sounds like the classic Stalinist argument.
Right, and that is where they were proposing joint leadership. And in the famous minutes of those meetings, which the US actually released, and there was a copy, I don't know if it's still in the Education Department's office, but there was a copy of those minutes. George Louison was quoted in the minutes as saying that he could not find anywhere in the literature reference to joint leadership. And while George was opposed to the joint leadership position, but the fact that he had to go to talk about the literature, where in the literature was there joint leadership mentioned, and that in something by some East German political person, there are no reference to that. I mean, why you want to discuss East Germany in the context of Grenada, God only knows. But it's an indication of the fact that, as Fidel had said, they become drunk on ideology. I think that was his term. They become drunk on ideology. And so it's clear that there was this view that Morris's style and practice of the politics was not in conformity with what they thought was necessary to deal with the challenges of the revolution at that point in time. Where in fact the opposite was the truth, because Morris was the only person who could have commanded the respect and regard of the masses of the Grenadian people, and therefore taken the Grenadian people in the revolutionary process to whatever next level it had to go. Right? So
that's correct.
Yeah. So I just thought I would mention that without getting into another discussion, because time is running out and we have to have another discussion around this and so on. And the last point is in relation to Roberto was talking about, how do we create the new politics and so on. And so some of the ideas that we have put out is the idea of the Second Republic, that we have to evolve from the post-independent state and the state of the First Republic, which institutions of state cannot deliver social justice and equity because they buttress the old economic relations of power and of status and of privilege and of discrimination on all levels, whether it is discrimination on the basis of class, discrimination on the basis of color, gender, age, race, religion, all of those discriminations. The state reinforces those discriminations. And therefore we have to create a new state, which is what we call the Second Republic, but which has built into them institutions of popular power in different forms and fashions to ensure that those who control the state power do not then abuse that state power, which is what ultimately happened in Grenada when Cord and Austin killed Morris and so on, and then created the RMC. That was turning, which was Morris's last comments, right, up on the fort.
Turn the guns on the masses.
That's right. Yeah. Right, which is the absolute opposite of what the revolution was supposed to be. And therefore we have to have, in the context of the Second Republic, institutions in the Constitution that give real power to people where they work and where they live, and so on, and ensure that there are real checks and balances on the power of the executive or the cabinet. So I will just end there. Yeah.
Comment about the Assembly of the People. Am I correct that you all had the last one in the Dominican Republic? I think that that is unforgivable, knowing how the Dominican Republic treats Haitians. And one of the things we will never sort out in this region is until we give Haiti the respect for being the mother of all the nation.
The next one will be in Trinidad and Tobago. So I look forward to full participation of the social movements in Trinidad and Tobago. I would just like to close with two quick things. I think we had a very good afternoon. Everybody agree? We had a really good afternoon. And my only little slogan before I close is from the Grenadian Revolution to Trinidad and Tobago's Second Republic. I think it's a journey that all of us, we have to walk, but we also have to make social justice a reality in Trinidad and Tobago. I think that is the only way we can truly honor Maurice Bishop. Today was to recognize the birth, as you clarified. Today was to recognize the birth. In October we'll probably have, well, not probably, we'll probably do something, to continue that analysis as to what went awry. But today was meant to be a recognition and a celebration, because I think Gregory Maguire, you would have said it was about hope. And therefore, Trinidad and Tobago's Second Republic is about hope. The last thing has to do with something very practical. We all discussed and we saw the link between what had happened 40 years ago and what is happening now. Today is also International Solidarity Day for Venezuela. All across the world as we speak, social movements, progressive forces are engaging in various types of solidarity activity to show that there are those of us around the world who will not willing to stand up against imperialism. And in that light, what we'd like to do once we have closed here is offer comrades here an opportunity to do short, just very short video clips, simply stating that hands off Venezuela. Because at the end of the day, regardless of how you feel, ideological or not, and this is not time to get, as I say, what, drunken with ideology. Regardless of how you may feel about President Maduro and the PSUV, it's not about that at this point. It's about an attempt to invade a neighbor that's so close to us that will cost the lives of tens of thousands of people. And if they could do that there, because of their oil reserve, we with little oil reserve, it's just a matter of time. So we also have to take a stand as progressive people. So I invite all those who will be, who would like to be part of that, just to make a short film. We are going to be sending it across to Venezuela, as well as we'll be sharing it with our comrades across the world who also engage in solidarity activities. So this is just part of us being part of history. So I want to thank everyone for spending this Saturday afternoon with us. It's now 10 to 6. But I think it was a lovely evening. I couldn't think of a better way to spend Saturday afternoon. Yeah? Y'all agree with that? So give yourselves a round of applause. as we work towards the Second Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.